The blood on Zelda Zimmerman's hands was not her own, but it might as well have been, for the weight of it would mark her forever if she did not act quickly. She stood in the back room of the First National Bank of Fort Benton, Montana, staring down at the body of Marcus Hollis, the head clerk who had whispered to her just 3 hours earlier that he had something important to show her. Something that would change everything she thought she knew about the man who employed them both. It was June of 1882, and the summer heat pressing through the small window made the air thick and difficult to breathe. But that was not what made her gasp for air as she clutched the leather portfolio to her chest. Inside that portfolio were documents, ledgers, and carefully coded notes that Marcus had painstakingly gathered over the past 8 months. They proved beyond any shadow of doubt that Theodore Blackthorne, the most respected banker in Fort Benton and half of Montana territory, was a thief who had been systematically draining the accounts of nearly every rancher, widow, and business owner who trusted him with their savings. Marcus had discovered the scheme when a discrepancy in the books led him down a trail of false entries and ghost accounts. He had been careful, so careful, but someone must have noticed. Now he lay on the floor with a bullet in his chest, and Zelda knew with terrible certainty that whoever had killed him would come looking for those documents next. She was 23 years old, an orphan who had clawed her way into respectable employment through sheer determination and a gift for numbers that her schoolteacher had recognized when she was just a girl. The bank had been her salvation after her parents died of cholera when she was 17. Theodore Blackthorne had seemed like a benefactor, a pillar of the community who had given her a chance when no one else would. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife could have. Zelda pressed her hand to her mouth to stifle a sob. There was no time for grief, no time to mourn Marcus or her own shattered illusions. She had to get these documents to Marshal Crawford, whose office was clear across town on the other side of the Missouri River. But she could not simply walk out the front door. Blackthorne had men everywhere, eyes and ears that reported back to him. She had seen them, though she had not understood what they were until this moment. The way certain rough-looking characters always seemed to be loitering near the bank, the way Blackthorne would step outside to speak with them in low tones. She tucked the portfolio under her arm and moved toward the back door, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The door opened onto an alley that reeked of garbage and horse waste. She stepped out into the afternoon sun, blinking against the brightness, and tried to look casual as she turned toward the main street. "Miss Zimmerman." The voice froze her blood. She turned slowly to see Ned Garrett, one of Blackthorne's hired thugs, blocking the mouth of the alley. He was a tall man, with a face like weathered leather and eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. "Mr. Garrett," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I was just stepping out for some air. It is terribly warm inside today." "That so?" He took a step toward her, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. "Mr. Blackthorne wants to see you, says you left your post without permission." "I will return directly," she said. "I just need a moment." "He wants to see you now." His eyes dropped to the portfolio under her arm. "What have you got there?" "Just some personal correspondence," she said, but her voice betrayed her with a slight tremor. Ned's hand closed around the grip of his pistol. "I think you better hand that over." Zelda did the only thing she could think to do. She ran. She bolted past Ned, taking him by surprise for just a moment, long enough for her to reach the crowded main street. She heard him curse behind her, heard his boots pounding on the dirt as he gave chase. People turned to stare as she ran past, her skirts hiked up in a most unladylike fashion. But she did not care about propriety now. She cared only about survival. "Stop that woman!" Ned shouted behind her. "Thief!" The words sent ice through her veins. If people believed she was a thief, they would help Ned catch her. She had to get away, had to find somewhere to hide, somewhere she could catch her breath and figure out what to do next. A hand shot out from a doorway and grabbed her arm, yanking her sideways with such force that she nearly dropped the portfolio. She opened her mouth to scream, but another hand clamped over it, and she found herself pulled into the dim interior of what appeared to be a saloon. "Quiet," a man's voice said urgently in her ear. "I am trying to help you." She stopped struggling, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. The hand over her mouth slowly released, and she turned to look at her rescuer. He was perhaps 27 or 28, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the collar of his worn shirt, and he had the lean, rangy build of a man who spent his life on horseback. There was a wariness about him, a watchfulness that spoke of hard experience, but his eyes when they met hers held genuine concern. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Name is Vaughn Zeller," he said. "I am a wrangler for the Circle Bar Ranch up north of here, and unless I miss my guess, you are in a considerable amount of trouble." "I did not steal anything," she said quickly. "Whatever that man said, I am not a thief." "I believe you," Vaughn said, which surprised her. "I have seen Ned Garrett around town before. He works for Theodore Blackthorne, and any man who keeps company like that is not to be trusted. What is in that portfolio that has them so worked up?" She hesitated, studying his face. She had no reason to trust this stranger, but she also had no other options. Ned would be searching for her, and soon Blackthorne would have half the town looking. She needed help, and something in Vaughn Zeller's steady gaze made her want to believe he was offering it genuinely. "Proof," she said quietly. "Proof that Theodore Blackthorne has been stealing from his depositors. The head clerk discovered it, and now he is dead. They killed him, and they will kill me too if they catch me." Vaughn's expression darkened. "My boss, Richard Holland, has an account with that bank. He has been complaining for months that something did not add up with his statements." He looked toward the door, then back at Zelda. "You need to get those documents to the Marshal." "I know," she said, "but I cannot get across town without being seen." "Then we will not go through town," Vaughn said. "Come on." He led her through the saloon, past the curious stares of day drinkers, and out a back door that opened onto another alley. This one led down toward the river, away from the main thoroughfare where Ned would be searching. "Where are we going?" Zelda asked, hiking up her skirts again to keep pace with Vaughn's long strides. "My horse is at the livery stable down by the waterfront," he said. "We can ride upriver and cross at the ford, then come into the marshal's office from the north. They will be watching the bridge and the main roads." It was a good plan, better than anything Zelda could have devised on her own. She nodded and followed him, her heart still racing, but her fear beginning to transform into something else. Something like hope. The livery stable was a large wooden structure that smelled of hay and horse and leather. Vaughn's mount was a sturdy roan gelding, with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor. Vaughn saddled him quickly, his movements efficient and practiced, then turned to Zelda. "Can you ride?" he asked. "I can stay on a horse," she said. "I am not an accomplished rider, but I will manage." "Good enough." He swung up into the saddle, then reached down to help her up behind him. Zelda had never ridden in such close proximity to a man before, and she felt her face heat as she wrapped her arms around his waist, the portfolio pressed between them. They rode out of the stable at a casual walk, not wanting to draw attention. But once they cleared the edges of town, Vaughn urged the roan into a canter. The horse responded smoothly, his gait easy despite carrying two riders. Zelda held on tightly, her face pressed against Vaughn's back, breathing in the scent of horse and sweat and something else, something clean and masculine that made her stomach flutter in a way that had nothing to do with fear. The ford was about 2 miles upriver, a shallow crossing that local ranchers used to avoid the toll bridge. The water was running clear and low, perfect for crossing, and the roan splashed through it without hesitation. On the far bank, Vaughn turned the horse north, keeping to the tree line, where they would be less visible from the town. "Tell me about these documents," he said over his shoulder as they rode. "What exactly did your clerk friend discover?" Zelda took a deep breath. Marcus found discrepancies in the ledgers, small ones at first, just a few dollars here and there. But when he started digging deeper, he found that Blackthorne had created false accounts under fictitious names. He would transfer money from legitimate accounts into these ghost accounts, then withdraw it for his own use. The amounts were always small enough that people would not notice immediately, but over time, it added up to thousands of dollars. "How long has this been going on?" Vaughn asked. "At least 3 years, possibly longer," Zelda said. Marcus only had access to the records from 1879 onward, but he suspected it went back further. The documents in this portfolio include copies of the false ledger entries, the names of the ghost accounts, and a full accounting of every transaction Marcus could trace. It is all there, everything the marshal would need to arrest Blackthorne and prosecute him. "Your friend was a brave man," Vaughn said quietly. "He was a good man," Zelda said, and her voice broke slightly. "He did not deserve to die." "No, he did not," Vaughn agreed. "But his death will not be for nothing. We will get those documents to Marshal Crawford, and Blackthorne will answer for what he has done." They rode in silence for a while, the sun beating down on them, the Missouri River glinting through the trees to their left. Zelda found herself acutely aware of every point where her body touched Vaughn's, the solid warmth of his back against her cheek, the strength in the arms she held onto. She barely knew this man, yet he had risked his own safety to help her without a moment's hesitation. It was a kindness she had not expected, and it made her chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with running or fear. "Why did you help me?" she asked suddenly. "You do not know me. You could have let Ned catch me and gone about your business." Vaughn was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "I have never been one to stand by and watch a woman in trouble," he said. "But more than that, I have seen what men like Blackthorne do. They use their respectability as a shield while they prey on honest folk who trust them. My father lost everything to a man like that back in Kansas, a banker who embezzled his life savings. My father never recovered from it. He died a broken man when I was 19. So, no, I could not let Ned catch you. Not when you were trying to do the right thing." Zelda tightened her arms around him slightly, a wordless gesture of understanding and gratitude. "I am sorry about your father," she said. "It was a long time ago," Vaughn said, but she could hear the old pain in his voice. "But that is why I came to Montana, to start fresh where men are judged by their actions, not their names or their bank accounts. I have worked hard to build a reputation as an honest wrangler, someone people can rely on. I will not let men like Blackthorne turn this territory into the same kind of corrupt place I left behind." There was a fierce conviction in his words that stirred something in Zelda's chest. She had spent so long feeling alone, feeling like the world was a cold and indifferent place where orphans like her had to fight for every scrap of security. But here was a man who cared about justice, who was willing to risk himself for a stranger because it was the right thing to do. It made her believe, perhaps for the first time in years, that there were still good people in the world. They approached Fort Benton from the north, as Vaughn had planned, riding past ranches and farms where children played in yards and women hung laundry on lines. It all looked so peaceful, so normal, and Zelda found it hard to believe that, just a few miles away, Marcus lay dead, and Blackthorne was orchestrating a manhunt for her. Marshal Crawford's office was a squat wooden building near the northern edge of town, marked by a simple sign and a hitching post out front. Vaughn dismounted and helped Zelda down, his hands steady on her waist. Their eyes met for a moment, and Zelda saw her own tension reflected in his face. "Ready?" he asked. "As I will ever be," she said. They walked into the marshal's office together, and Zelda was relieved to find the marshal himself behind his desk, a grizzled man in his 50s with a thick mustache and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Marshal Crawford," Vaughn said. "This is Miss Zelda Zimmerman. She has information about a serious crime, and she needs your help." The marshal looked from Vaughn to Zelda, his expression unreadable. "What kind of crime are we talking about?" Zelda stepped forward and placed the portfolio on his desk. "Theodore Blackthorne has been embezzling from his depositors at the First National Bank. I have proof. Documented evidence gathered by the head clerk, Marcus Hollis. Marcus was murdered this afternoon, and Blackthorne's men are hunting me because I have these documents." Marshal Crawford's eyebrows rose. "Those are serious accusations, Miss Zimmerman. Theodore Blackthorne is a respected man in this town." "I know," Zelda said. "That is why he has gotten away with it for so long. But the evidence is all here, Marshal. Please look at it. Marcus died to bring this information to light. Do not let his death be meaningless." The marshal studied her face for a long moment, then opened the portfolio and began leafing through the documents. His expression grew darker with each page he turned. Vaughn stood close to Zelda, his presence a comfort, and she found herself leaning slightly toward him without conscious thought. After what felt like an eternity, Marshal Crawford looked up. "This is damning evidence," he said slowly. "If this is genuine, Blackthorne has stolen from nearly every major rancher and business owner in the territory. The amount of money involved must be staggering." "Marcus estimated at least $50,000, Zelda said. "Possibly more." The marshal let out a low whistle. "That is a fortune." He closed the portfolio and looked at Zelda with newfound respect. "You have courage, Miss Zimmerman, bringing this to me. But you understand that this puts you in considerable danger. Blackthorne will not stop hunting you, not with evidence like this out there." "I know," Zelda said, but I could not let him get away with it. Too many people have been hurt. You mentioned that Marcus Hollis was murdered, the marshal said. Where is the body? In the back room of the bank, Zelda said. I found him there this afternoon. He had been shot. Marshal Crawford stood up, his face grim. I will need to see the body and secure it as evidence. And I will need to move quickly before Blackthorne can destroy any remaining records at the bank. He looked at Vaughn. Mr. Zeller, I know you by reputation. You are an honest man. Would you be willing to stay with Miss Zimmerman and keep her safe while I handle this? I cannot spare a deputy right now, and she cannot go back to her lodgings. Of course, Vaughn said without hesitation. I will keep her safe, Marshal. You have my word. Good man. The marshal strapped on his gun belt and grabbed his hat. There is a boarding house 2 streets over, run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. She is discreet and trustworthy. Take Miss Zimmerman there and get her a room. I will come find you once I have Blackthorne in custody. He paused at the door and looked back at Zelda. You did the right thing, Miss Zimmerman. It takes real courage to stand up to a man like Blackthorne. This territory needs more people like you. Then he was gone, and Zelda found herself alone with Vaughn in the small office. The adrenaline that had been sustaining her suddenly drained away, and her legs felt weak. Vaughn caught her elbow as she swayed. Easy, he said gently. You have been through a lot today. Let us get you somewhere safe where you can rest. She nodded, too exhausted to speak. Vaughn guided her back outside and helped her mount his horse again, then swung up behind her this time, his arms coming around her to hold the reins. It felt different with him behind her, protective rather than merely practical, and Zelda allowed herself to lean back against his chest, drawing strength from his solid presence. Mrs. Patterson's boarding house was exactly as the marshal had described, a well-kept establishment that radiated respectability. The widow herself was a motherly woman in her 60s who took one look at Zelda's pale face and immediately ushered them inside. The poor dear looks done in, she said to Vaughn. Marshal Crawford sent word ahead that you might be coming. I have a room ready, and I will bring up some supper directly. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over a quiet side street. Vaughn saw Zelda settled in a chair, then turned to Mrs. Patterson. I will need a room as well, he said, preferably one near Miss Zimmerman's. The one right next door is available, Mrs. Patterson said. I will have it ready in just a moment. When she had gone, Vaughn pulled a chair over to sit across from Zelda. How are you holding up? He asked. I am not entirely sure, Zelda admitted. She looked down at her hands, which were trembling slightly. This morning, I woke up thinking it would be an ordinary day. Now, Marcus is dead, my employer is a criminal, and I am in hiding with a cowboy I met only a few hours ago. She looked up at him, and despite everything, she felt a small smile tug at her lips. It has been quite a day. Vaughn returned her smile, and it transformed his face, softening the hard edges and making him look younger. It has indeed, he said, but you handled yourself with remarkable composure. Not many people would have had the presence of mind to grab those documents and run. I did not feel composed, Zelda said. I felt terrified. Courage is not the absence of fear, Vaughn said. It is acting despite it, and you, Miss Zimmerman, showed tremendous courage today. His words warmed her more than they should have, and Zelda felt a blush creeping into her cheeks. She was saved from having to respond by Mrs. Patterson's return, with a tray laden with food. There was fresh bread, cold chicken, cheese, and a pot of hot tea that smelled like heaven. You eat up, dear, Mrs. Patterson said kindly. You too, Mr. Zeller. You both look like you could use a good meal and a rest. She left them alone again, and Vaughn insisted that Zelda eat first. She discovered that she was ravenous, and the food restored some of her strength. Vaughn ate more sparingly, his attention divided between his meal and watching the street outside the window. Do you think the marshal will be able to arrest Blackthorne? Zelda asked. The marshal is a good man and a smart one, Vaughn said. With the evidence you provided, he has more than enough to bring charges. The question is whether Blackthorne will come quietly or whether he will try to run. He has money, Zelda said, enough to disappear if he wants to. True, Vaughn acknowledged, but he also has a life here, a reputation. Men like Blackthorne do not give those things up easily. My guess is he will try to bluff his way through, Claim the documents are forgeries or that Marcus was the real thief. That will not work, though, Zelda said. The documents are too detailed, too accurate. Anyone who compares them to the actual bank records will see that they are genuine. Then justice will be served, Vaughn said, though it may take time. They finished their meal in companionable silence, and then Vaughn stood up. You should rest, he said. It has been a long day, and you are safe here. Mrs. Patterson will not let anyone in who should not be here, and I will be right next door if you need anything. Thank you, Zelda said, and she meant it with her whole heart. For everything. I do not know what would have happened to me if you had not helped me. Nothing good, Vaughn said honestly, but you do not need to thank me. I did what anyone decent would have done. That is not true, Zelda said quietly. Most people would have looked the other way. Most people would not have wanted to get involved. You risked your own safety for a stranger, and I will not forget that. Vaughn looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes. Get some rest, Miss Zimmerman, he said softly. Then he left, closing the door quietly behind him. Zelda sat in the chair for a while longer, too keyed up to sleep despite her exhaustion. Her mind kept replaying the events of the day, from the moment she found Marcus's body to her flight through the streets to this strange, unexpected safety with a man she barely knew but instinctively trusted. Eventually, she forced herself to wash her face and hands in the basin, then lay down on the bed fully clothed. Sleep came eventually, but it was troubled, full of dreams of running through endless alleys while shadows with guns pursued her. She woke with a start to find the room dark except for a sliver of moonlight coming through the window. Her heart was pounding, and for a moment she could not remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back, and she sat up, pressing a hand to her chest. A soft knock came at the door, and Vaughn's voice said quietly, Miss Zimmerman, are you all right? I heard you cry out. Zelda climbed out of bed and opened the door. Vaughn stood in the hallway, his hair tousled from sleep, concern evident in his face. I am sorry, she said. I had a nightmare. I did not mean to wake you. You did not wake me, Vaughn said. I was not sleeping much myself, too much on my mind. He hesitated, then said, Would you like some company? I know it is not proper, but I thought you might feel better not being alone. Zelda knew she should refuse, knew that allowing a man into her room at night was completely improper, but she also knew that she did not want to be alone with her fears. She nodded and stepped back, allowing him to enter. Vaughn left the door slightly ajar, a concession to propriety, and took the chair while Zelda sat on the edge of the bed. The moonlight cast strange shadows across the room, making it feel unreal, as if they existed in some space outside normal time. Tell me about yourself, Vaughn said quietly. Where did you grow up? How did you end up working for Blackthorne? Zelda found herself telling him things she had not spoken of in years. About growing up in a small town in Illinois, about her parents who had been farmers, about how they died during the cholera epidemic of 1876, about being 17 and alone, with nothing but a strong back and a good mind for figures, about making her way west because she had heard there were opportunities in the territories for people willing to work hard. I arrived in Fort Benton 4 years ago, she said. I had almost no money and no prospects. I took work where I could find it, cleaning houses, washing dishes, but I knew numbers and I was good at keeping accounts. When Theodore Blackthorne posted a notice that he needed a bookkeeper, I applied. He gave me a chance when no one else would, and I thought he was a good man. Her voice turned bitter. I thought I was lucky to work for him. He fooled a lot of people, Vaughn said. That is how men like him operate. They build a facade of respectability so solid that no one thinks to look behind it. Tell me about your life, Zelda said. You said you came from Kansas? Vaughn nodded. Small town, not much different from yours. My father was a blacksmith, a good one. He worked hard all his life and saved every penny he could. He had dreams of buying a piece of land, starting a small ranch. When I was 17, he put all his savings in a bank run by a man everyone trusted. 2 years later, that man disappeared in the night, and the bank collapsed. My father's money was gone, along with the savings of half the town. He paused, his jaw tight. It broke something in him. He was never the same after that. He died of a heart attack less than a year later, and I have always believed it was the grief and stress that killed him. I am so sorry, Zelda said, reaching out instinctively to touch his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong. It taught me something important, Vaughn said. It taught me that a man's character is not determined by his reputation or his wealth, but by his actions. I decided I wanted to be the kind of man who could be counted on, who did the right thing even when it was hard. So I worked my way west, taking jobs at different ranches, learning everything I could about horses and cattle. I have been with the Circle Bar for 3 years now, and I have earned the respect of my boss and my fellow wranglers. It is a good life, an honest one. Do you ever think about having your own ranch? Zelda asked. Every day, Vaughn admitted. I have been saving, putting away money whenever I can. Another few years and I should have enough to buy a small spread. Nothing fancy, but enough to run some cattle and horses. It is what I want more than anything, to build something of my own. They talked through the night, the conversation flowing easily between them. Zelda found herself telling Vaughn things she had never told anyone, her fears and hopes and dreams. He listened with genuine interest, asking questions, sharing his own thoughts. As the sky outside began to lighten with the approach of dawn, Zelda realized with a start that she had never felt so comfortable with another person, so understood. I should go back to my room, Vaughn said reluctantly as the first rays of sunlight painted the walls gold. Mrs. Patterson will be scandalized if she finds me here. Thank you for staying, Zelda said. I needed the company more than I realized. Vaughn stood up, but he did not immediately move toward the door. Instead, he looked down at her, his expression serious. Miss Zimmerman, I want you to know that whatever happens with Blackthorne, whatever comes next, you are not alone. I will help you through this. Why? Zelda asked softly. Why are you doing all this for me? Vaughn was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was low and intense. Because from the moment I saw you running down that street, something in me recognized something in you. I cannot explain it better than that. I just know that I want to help you, to protect you, to see you safe and happy. Maybe that makes me a fool, but I have never been one to ignore what my gut tells me. Zelda's heart was beating very fast. She stood up, bringing them face to face, close enough that she could see the darker ring around his gray irises, could smell the clean scent of him. You are not a fool, she whispered. I feel it too. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, and she realized with surprise that she wanted him to. But Vaughn stepped back, though his eyes held regret. Get some rest, he said. I will be next door if you need me. After he left, Zelda lay back down on the bed, her mind whirling. She barely knew this man, had met him less than 24 hours ago, yet she felt a connection to him that defied logic. It terrified her and exhilarated her in equal measure. She must have dozed off, because the next thing she knew, Mrs. Patterson was knocking on her door with breakfast, and the news that Marshal Crawford was downstairs waiting to speak with them. Zelda dressed quickly in the same clothes she had worn yesterday, wishing desperately for a change of garments, then hurried downstairs where Vaughn was already waiting with the marshal. Good morning, Miss Zimmerman, Marshal Crawford said. I have news. We arrested Theodore Blackthorne last night. He is in custody and will stand trial for embezzlement and murder. Relief flooded through Zelda so powerfully that her knees went weak. You found Marcus's body? We did, the marshal said grimly, and we found evidence linking Blackthorne to the murder. One of his own men turned against him once he realized the game was up. Ned Garrett, actually. Seems he was willing to do a lot of things for money, but he drew the line at hanging for murder. He confessed that Blackthorne ordered him to kill Marcus when Blackthorne discovered Marcus had been copying documents. What about the money? Vaughn asked. Will the depositors get their savings back? That is more complicated, the marshal admitted. We found about $30,000 in cash hidden in Blackthorne's house, which we have seized as evidence, but the rest appears to have been spent or invested in properties under false names. It will take months, maybe years, to track it all down and return it to the rightful owners, but at least the bleeding has stopped. No one else will lose money to that snake. What happens to me now? Zelda asked. I no longer have employment, and I cannot afford to pay for this room indefinitely. You will be needed as a witness at the trial, the marshal said. But that will not be for several weeks at least. As for employment, I have already had several business owners approach me about hiring you, once word got around about your role in exposing Blackthorne. Seems your reputation for honesty and skill with numbers has made you quite sought after. This was unexpected good news, and Zelda felt some of the weight lift from her shoulders. That is very kind of them, she said. It is practical, the marshal corrected. You are good at what you do, and you have proven you have integrity. That is worth a lot in this territory. He tipped his hat to both of them. I will be in touch as we prepare for the trial. In the meantime, you are both free to go about your business. After the marshal left, Vaughn turned to Zelda. I need to get back to the Circle Bar, he said. My boss will be wondering where I have been, but I do not want to leave you here alone. I will be fine, Zelda said, though part of her wanted to beg him to stay. You have your own life to get back to. You have already done so much for me. Will you come out to the ranch? Vaughn asked suddenly. In a few days, once you have settled things here in town, I would like you to meet my boss and see the place. We are always looking for help with the books during roundup season. The pay is not much, but it would give you some income while you decide what you want to do next. Zelda felt a surge of warmth at the invitation. I would like that, she said. Vaughn smiled, that transformative smile that made her heart skip. Good. I will come back for you on Sunday, if that suits you. That gives you a few days to rest and get your affairs in order. Sunday would be perfect, Zelda said. Vaughn reached out and took her hand, holding it gently. Stay safe, Zelda, he said, using her first name for the first time. The sound of it on his lips sent a little shiver through her. You too, Vaughn, she said. He squeezed her hand once more, then left. Zelda watched through the window as he rode away on his roan gelding headed north out of town. She felt his absence like a physical ache, which was ridiculous given that she had only known him for a day. But there was no denying the connection between them, the sense that something significant had begun. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Zelda was interviewed by the prosecutor, a sharp-minded young man who assured her that the case against Blackthorne was solid. She met with several potential employers, including the owner of the general store and a lawyer who needed someone to manage his accounts. She chose the lawyer, a kind man named Mr. Hutchins, who offered fair wages and seemed genuinely interested in treating her with respect. She also bought herself 2 new dresses, a practical consideration since she could not keep wearing the same clothes day after day, but also because she wanted to look nice when she saw Vaughn again. The realization made her blush, but she could not deny it. She cared what Vaughn thought of her, cared about making a good impression. Sunday arrived warm and clear, perfect weather for a ride. Zelda was dressed in one of her new dresses, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes, and she had braided her dark hair and pinned it up in a neat coil. She felt nervous and excited in equal measure as she waited on the front porch of the boarding house. Vaughn arrived exactly when he said he would, riding his roan and leading a gentle sorrel mare for Zelda. He looked scrubbed and clean, his dark hair still damp, and the smile he gave her when he saw her made her heart race. You look beautiful, he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. Thank you, she said. You look very nice yourself. He helped her mount the sorrel, his hands lingering on her waist a moment longer than necessary, and then they were riding out of Fort Benton together, heading north toward the Circle Bar Ranch. The countryside was beautiful, rolling grassland dotted with wildflowers and stands of cottonwood trees. The Missouri River wound through the landscape like a silver ribbon, and in the distance, the mountains rose blue and hazy against the horizon. Zelda had lived in Montana for 4 years, but she had rarely ventured outside of Fort Benton. Now, riding beside Vaughn through this vast open country, she felt like she was seeing it for the first time. It is magnificent, she said. It is, Vaughn agreed. This land gets into your blood. I cannot imagine living anywhere else now. They talked as they rode, continuing the easy conversation that had begun that first night in her room. Vaughn told her about the Circle Bar, about his boss, Richard Holland, who had started the ranch 10 years earlier with nothing but determination and a good eye for cattle. He told her about the other wranglers, the hard work of roundup and branding, the satisfaction of seeing a herd of healthy cattle fattened on good grass. Zelda told him about growing up on a farm, about the rhythms of planting and harvest, the way the seasons shaped everything. She admitted that she had always felt more comfortable with numbers than with social niceties, that working with ledgers and accounts felt natural to her in a way that making small talk never had. That is because you have an honest mind, Vaughn said. Numbers do not lie, and you appreciate that. People lie all the time, whether they mean to or not. Do you lie? Zelda asked, curious. I try not to, Vaughn said, but I suppose everyone bends the truth sometimes, when it is easier than facing something hard. I think the measure of a person is how often they choose honesty, even when it costs them. They reached the Circle Bar Ranch in the early afternoon. It was a sprawling operation, with a large house for Mr. Holland, a bunkhouse for the wranglers, several barns and corrals, and pastures that seemed to stretch to the horizon. Cattle grazed peacefully in the distance, watched over by a couple of riders on horseback. Richard Holland came out to greet them, a tall man in his 40s with a weathered face and kind eyes. He shook Zelda's hand warmly after Vaughn introduced them. "Miss Zimmerman, I have heard about what you did, exposing that scoundrel Blackthorne," he said. "Took real courage, and I appreciate it. That man was stealing from me and half the ranchers in the territory." "I just did what was right," Zelda said. "Well, I appreciate it nonetheless," Mr. Holland said. "Vaughn tells me you are good with figures. As it happens, I could use some help sorting out my accounts. My wife usually handles the books, but she is with child and not feeling up to it lately. If you are willing, I would be happy to pay you for your time." "I would be glad to help," Zelda said. Mr. Holland showed her to his office, a cluttered room filled with ledgers and receipts and correspondence. Zelda looked at the chaos and felt her fingers itch to bring order to it. Mr. Holland left her to it, and she spent the next several hours immersed in the work, sorting and categorizing and making notes about what needed to be reconciled. She was so absorbed that she barely noticed the passage of time until Vaughn appeared in the doorway, a cup of coffee in each hand. "Thought you might need this," he said, offering her one of the cups. Zelda accepted gratefully, realizing that her back was stiff from hunching over the desk. "What time is it?" she asked. "Nearly 6, Vaughn said. "You have been at it for hours. How is it looking?" "Better than I expected," Zelda said. "Mr. Holland is actually quite organized. He just needs someone to input all this information into the ledgers properly. It will take a few weeks to get everything up to date, but it is manageable." "That is good news," Vaughn said. "Come on, let us get some air before supper. I want to show you something." He led her outside and toward one of the corrals where several horses were grazing. They were beautiful animals, well-muscled and sleek, clearly well cared for. "These are some of the horses I have been training," Vaughn said. "That bay gelding there, I brought him in as a Greenbrook 3-year-old last year. He was stubborn as a mule, but patient work paid off. Mr. Holland sold him last month to a rancher up in Helena for twice what we paid for him." "You trained him?" Zelda asked, impressed. "I did," Vaughn said, and there was quiet pride in his voice. "I have a way with horses. They trust me, and I never break that trust. It is the same principle as with people, really. You have to earn trust through consistency and honesty." He leaned against the fence, watching the horses, and Zelda moved to stand beside him. The evening light was soft and golden, painting everything with a warm glow. She was acutely aware of his nearness, of the way their shoulders almost touched. "I am glad you invited me here," she said quietly. "This place is beautiful, and the work Mr. Holland has offered me will be a good way to keep busy while I wait for the trial." "I am glad you came," Vaughn said. He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "Zelda, I know we have not known each other long, but I need you to know that what I feel for you is real. I have never been one for fancy words or grand gestures, but I care about you. More than I probably should, given that we met less than a week ago." Zelda's breath caught. "I feel the same way," she admitted. "It frightens me a little, how much I care about you already, but I cannot deny it." Vaughn reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "I do not want you to be frightened," he said softly. "I want you to feel safe and happy." "I do feel safe with you," Zelda said. "Safer than I have felt in a long time." Vaughn leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, but Zelda did not want to. She tilted her face up to meet his, and when their lips touched, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle and sweet, full of promise, and when they finally pulled apart, Zelda felt like her whole world had shifted. "I have wanted to do that since the first moment I saw you," Vaughn confessed, his forehead resting against hers. "I have wanted you to," Zelda said, and laughed a little at her own boldness. They were called to supper before things could go further, and Zelda was grateful for the interruption. She needed time to process these overwhelming feelings, to understand what was happening between them. Supper was a lively affair, with Mr. Holland, his wife Sarah, who was indeed quite pregnant, several of the wranglers, and a young married couple who helped run the household. Everyone was friendly and welcoming, treating Zelda like she already belonged there. The conversation ranged from ranch business to local gossip to good-natured teasing among the wranglers. Zelda found herself laughing more than she had in months, the tension of the past week finally beginning to ease. After supper, Vaughn walked her back to the house where she would stay the night, a guest room that Sarah had prepared for her. "Tomorrow I will drive you back to Fort Benton," Vaughn said, "but I was hoping you might consider coming back out here regularly to work on Mr. Holland's books. You could stay over when needed, make a real project of it." "I would like that," Zelda said. "Very much." "Good," Vaughn said, and kissed her again, this time with more heat, more urgency. Zelda responded without thinking, her hands coming up to tangle in his hair, her body pressing against his. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I should let you get some rest," Vaughn said, though his voice was rough with reluctance. "Probably," Zelda agreed, but she did not want him to go. She wanted to pull him into her room and damn propriety, but she was not quite brave enough for that, not yet. Vaughn seemed to read her thoughts in her face. "Soon," he said, and it was a promise. "When the time is right, when we have both had a chance to be sure this is real, I will not rush you, Zelda." "Thank you," she whispered, then more boldly, "but do not make me wait too long." His laugh was low and warm. "I will try not to," he said, and kissed her forehead, before forcing himself to step away. The next few weeks established a pattern. Zelda would spend 3 days a week at the Circle Bar Ranch, working on Mr. Holland's books and spending her evenings with Vaughn. The other days she spent in Fort Benton, working for Mr. Hutchins and preparing for the trial. It was a busy, fulfilling life, and for the first time since her parents died, Zelda felt like she had found a place where she belonged. Her relationship with Vaughn deepened with each passing day. They talked about everything, their pasts and their dreams for the future. Vaughn told her about his plans for his own ranch, the kind of horses he wanted to raise, the life he hoped to build. Zelda shared her own dreams, which were simpler but no less heartfelt. She wanted security, a home of her own, a family. She wanted to never again feel the precarious uncertainty of being alone in the world. "You will never be alone again," Vaughn told her one evening as they sat together on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sun set over the mountains. "I promise you that." "You cannot make that promise," Zelda said, though she wanted desperately to believe him. "I can, and I do," Vaughn said firmly. He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Zelda, I love you. I know it is fast. I know we have not known each other long, but I am as certain of this as I am of anything in my life. I want to marry you, if you will have me. I want to build a life with you, raise a family, grow old together." Zelda's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too," she said. "So much it terrifies me." "Then marry me," Vaughn said. "Say yes, and let us stop being terrified and start being happy." "Yes," Zelda said, and laughed through her tears. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes." Vaughn pulled her into his arms and kissed her with such joy and passion that it made her dizzy. When they finally broke apart, both were grinning like fools. "I do not have a ring yet," Vaughn said. "I will get you one, a proper one." "I do not need a ring to know you love me," Zelda said, "but I will not say no to one either." They told Mr. Holland and Sarah that evening, and the couple was delighted. Sarah hugged Zelda tightly, whispering in her ear that she was getting a wonderful man and that she was happy to have another woman nearby. "We will have the wedding after the trial," Vaughn said. "I want that business with Blackthorne finished before we start our new life together." The trial came in late July, a sweltering week when the whole town seemed to squeeze into the courtroom to witness the downfall of Theodore Blackthorne. Zelda testified about finding Marcus's body and the documents, about the months of discrepancies she had noticed but not understood until it was too late. Her testimony was clear and damning, and the jury took less than 2 hours to return a guilty verdict on all charges. Blackthorne was sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison, and Ned Garrett, who had testified against his former boss, received a reduced sentence of 5 years. Marcus Hollis's family received a portion of the recovered funds as compensation for their loss, and the depositors began the long process of reclaiming their stolen money. For Zelda, testifying had been difficult, but also cathartic. She had looked Theodore Blackthorne in the eye and told the truth, and justice had been served. Marcus's death had not been for nothing. The wedding took place on a perfect August morning at the little church in Fort Benton. Zelda wore a simple white dress that Sarah had helped her sew, with wildflowers from the prairie woven into her hair. Vaughn wore his best clothes and looked so handsome that Zelda felt her heart might burst with love for him. They exchanged vows in front of a small gathering of friends and well-wishers, including Mr. and Mrs. Holland, Marshal Crawford, Mr. Hutchins, and several of the wranglers from the Circle Bar. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Vaughn kissed her, Zelda felt like she was floating. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with food and dancing and laughter that lasted late into the evening. As the sun set and the stars came out, Vaughn took Zelda's hand and led her away from the party to the small cabin on the far edge of the property that Mr. Holland had given them as a wedding gift. "Our first home," Vaughn said, opening the door and lifting Zelda over the threshold. It was a single room with a fireplace, a bed, a table, and not much else, but to Zelda, it was perfect. It was theirs, a place they could build a life together. That night, as they lay together for the first time as husband and wife, Zelda thought about how drastically her life had changed in just a few months. She had gone from alone and frightened to cherished and secure, all because of a chance meeting with a cowboy who had seen a woman in trouble and decided to help. "What are you thinking about?" Vaughn asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "About fate," Zelda said. "About how everything had to happen exactly as it did for us to find each other. If Marcus had not discovered Blackthorne's theft, if I had not grabbed those documents, if you had not been in town that day, if you had not decided to help me, then we would have found each other some other way," Vaughn said with quiet certainty. "I believe that some people are meant to meet, that the universe conspires to bring them together. You are my person, Zelda. I would have found you eventually, no matter what." "I like to think that is true," Zelda said, snuggling closer to him. "It is true," Vaughn said, and kissed the top of her head. "Now, get some sleep, Mrs. Zeller. We have a whole lifetime ahead of us, and I plan to make every day of it count." They settled into married life with surprising ease. Zelda continued to work for Mr. Hutchins 3 days a week, which gave them needed income, while Vaughn saved for the land he wanted to buy. The other days she helped around the ranch, keeping the books and occasionally helping Sarah with household tasks. She discovered that she enjoyed the physical work, the sense of contributing to something larger than herself. Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby boy in September, and Zelda helped care for the infant while Sarah recovered. Holding the tiny, perfect baby filled her with longing for a child of her own, and she shared these feelings with Vaughn one evening as they sat together in their cabin. "I want that too," Vaughn said softly, "a family of our own. But there is no rush, Zelda. We have time." As it turned out, they did not have to wait long. By October, Zelda knew she was pregnant. She told Vaughn one evening after supper, watching nervously for his reaction. His face transformed with joy. "A baby," he breathed. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Zelda asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Vaughn said, pulling her into his arms. "I am thrilled, terrified, ecstatic, and incredibly grateful all at once. We are going to be parents, Zelda." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Vaughn was attentive and loving throughout. He insisted she not overwork herself, taking on extra chores to spare her the heavy lifting. Mr. Holland was similarly protective, refusing to let her do anything too strenuous. In December, Vaughn received news that changed everything. A rancher he knew from his early days in Montana had decided to sell his land, a beautiful piece of property about 10 miles north of the Circle Bar. It was 200 acres with good grass, a creek running through it, and a small but sturdy house. The price was more than fair, and Vaughn had just enough saved to make the down payment. "It is perfect," he told Zelda after taking her to see it. "We could build something real here, raise our family, run horses and cattle. It is everything I have been dreaming of." "Then we should do it," Zelda said, though the thought of leaving the security of the Circle Bar was frightening. "Are you sure?" Vaughn asked. "It will be hard work, especially with a baby coming." "I am sure," Zelda said firmly. "This is your dream, Vaughn, and I want to share it with you. We will make it work." They purchased the property in January of 1883, and Vaughn named it the Zadbar Ranch, combining their shared initial. They moved into the little house with their few possessions, and Vaughn immediately began planning improvements and expansions. Their son was born in May, a healthy baby boy with dark hair and his father's gray eyes, They named him Marcus, in honor of the man whose courage had brought them together. Holding his son for the first time, Vaughn wept with joy, and Zelda fell in love with him all over again, watching him cradle their baby with such gentleness. The early years on the Z-Bar were hard but rewarding. Vaughn worked from dawn to dusk, building up the herd, training horses, improving the property. Zelda managed the household and the books, raising Marcus while somehow finding time to help with ranch chores. They were often exhausted, but they were happy, building something real and lasting together. By their 5th anniversary, they had expanded the house, added a barn and several outbuildings, and built up a respectable herd of cattle and a string of well-trained horses. They had also added 2 more children to their family, a daughter named Rose and another son named Samuel. The house was often chaotic with the laughter and noise of 3 young children, but Zelda would not have traded it for anything. Their reputation grew over the years. Vaughn was known as an honest dealer and a skilled horseman, while Zelda's bookkeeping services were sought after by several neighboring ranches. They were respected members of the community, the kind of people others turned to for help and advice. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Vaughn took Zelda's hand and kissed her knuckles. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Marrying a cowboy with big dreams and not much else?" Zelda looked at him in surprise. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "You gave me everything I never knew I needed, a home, a family, a purpose. I have never been happier than I am right now." "Even with all the hard work and worry?" Vaughn asked. "Especially because of that," Zelda said. "We built this together, Vaughn. Every board of this house, every fence post, every calf born on this land represents our work, our dreams, our love. How could I regret any of that?" "I love you," Vaughn said simply. "More every day if that is even possible." "It is possible," Zelda said, "because I feel the same way." Years passed, bringing both joys and sorrows. They lost a 4th baby to miscarriage, which devastated them both, but they supported each other through the grief and emerged stronger. They weathered harsh winters and dry summers, cattle diseases and horse injuries. But the ranch continued to thrive. Their children grew into capable young adults. Marcus became a skilled horseman like his father, while Rose showed a head for business that reminded everyone of her mother. Samuel had a gift for working with his hands, and by the time he was 16, he could build or fix almost anything on the ranch. As Zelda approached her 40th birthday, she found herself reflecting on the strange twists of fate that had led her to this life. If Marcus Hollis had not discovered Blackthorne's theft, if she had not had the courage to run, if Vaughn had not been in town that day, everything would have been different. She would never have known this love, this life, this family. One evening, she shared these thoughts with Vaughn as they prepared for bed. He was 52 now, his dark hair streaked with silver, lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But to her, he was as handsome as the day they met. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked. "The day we met?" "All the time," Vaughn said. "It was the luckiest day of my life. I think about how easily I could have missed you, could have been somewhere else, could have walked past without getting involved, and then I think about how empty my life would have been without you in it, and it makes me grateful every single day that I made the choice I did." "I was so frightened," Zelda remembered, "running through those streets with Ned chasing me, thinking I was going to die. And then you grabbed me, pulled me inside, and everything changed. You were my hero that day, Vaughn." "You were your own hero," Vaughn corrected gently. "You made the choice to take those documents, to expose Blackthorne. All I did was help you get them to the Marshal. The courage was all yours." "We make a good team," Zelda said, kissing him softly. "The best team," Vaughn agreed. As the years continued to pass, the Z-Bar Ranch became one of the most successful operations in the region. Marcus took over more of the day-to-day running of the ranch, as Vaughn's back began to trouble him from decades of hard work. Rose married a neighboring rancher's son and had children of her own, bringing grandchildren to visit that filled the house with joy. Samuel became a sought-after craftsman, building furniture and structures that were praised throughout Montana. Zelda and Vaughn grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They had weathered every storm together, celebrated every triumph, mourned every loss. They had built not just a ranch, but a legacy, a family that stretched across Montana and beyond. On their 30th anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There was food and music and laughter, and as the sun began to set, Vaughn stood up and raised his glass. "I want to make a toast," he said, his voice still strong despite his years. "To my wife, Zelda, who has been my partner, my lover, my best friend, and the love of my life for 30 incredible years. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible. You have given me children and grandchildren, helped me build this ranch, and stood by me through everything life has thrown at us. I could not have asked for a better companion on this journey." Zelda felt tears prick her eyes as everyone raised their glasses and cheered. When the toasting was done and the party had moved inside, Vaughn took her hand and led her out to the porch where they had spent so many evenings together. "Do you remember the first time we stood here?" he asked. "The night I proposed?" "Of course I remember," Zelda said. "It was one of the happiest nights of my life." "Mine too," Vaughn said. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and they stood together watching the stars come out over the land they had built together. "Thank you," Zelda said softly. "For what?" Vaughn asked. "For seeing me that day," Zelda said. "For helping me when you had no reason to. For loving me, for building this life with me, for every moment of these 30 years. Thank you for all of it." "I should be thanking you," Vaughn said. "You took a chance on a cowboy with nothing but dreams and determination. You worked beside me, believed in me, loved me. You gave me everything I ever wanted and more." They kissed then, a kiss that held 30 years of love and devotion, of shared joys and sorrows, of a life well lived together. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling through their tears. Inside the house, their family continued to celebrate, but out on the porch, Zelda and Vaughn held each other and watched the night sky, grateful for every twist of fate that had brought them together, and every choice they had made to stay together. The following years were gentle ones. Vaughn's back continued to trouble him, and eventually he had to give up riding entirely, but he remained active in running the ranch, making decisions, and offering guidance to Marcus. Zelda's eyesight weakened, making detailed bookwork difficult, but she continued to oversee the ranch's finances with Rose's help. They spent their days surrounded by family, their evenings on the porch watching the sunset, their nights in each other's arms. They told their grandchildren stories about the old days, about the wild Montana territory before statehood, about the day they met and the adventure that brought them together. One autumn evening, when Zelda was 65 and Vaughn was 74, they sat together on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. The air was crisp with the promise of winter, and the mountains in the distance were already capped with snow. "I have been thinking," Vaughn said, his hand clasped with Zelda's, "about legacy, about what we leave behind." "We have left plenty behind," Zelda said, gesturing to the ranch spread out before them. 3 children, 8 grandchildren so far, a thriving ranch. That is a good legacy. "It is," Vaughn agreed. "But I think our real legacy is something simpler. We showed that 2 people, if they love each other enough and work hard enough, can build something beautiful out of nothing. We took a chance on each other when we had every reason to be cautious, and look what came of it." "A lifetime of happiness," Zelda said softly. "Exactly," Vaughn said. "And that is worth more than any ranch or any amount of money. That is what I hope our children and grandchildren remember about us. Not that we built a successful ranch, but that we loved each other well and built a good life together." "They will remember," Zelda assured him. "How could they forget? They see us every day, still holding hands after all these years, still looking at each other like we did when we were young." "Because I still see you as you were that day," Vaughn said. "Brave and beautiful and determined, running down that street with everything you cared about, clutched to your chest. You took my breath away then, and you still do now." "Sweet talker," Zelda said, but she was smiling. "I still see you as you were too, my rescuer, my hero, my love." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. The ranch was quiet, the cattle settled for the evening, the horses dozing in their corrals. It was peaceful, perfect, everything they had worked so hard to create. The years continued to be kind to them. They celebrated their 40th anniversary surrounded by an even larger family, as more grandchildren were born, and the first great-grandchildren began to arrive. The Z-Bar Ranch continued to thrive under Marcus's management, and the family name became synonymous with quality horses and honest dealing. Vaughn passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, Zelda beside him, as she had been for 51 years. The grief was overwhelming, but so too was the gratitude for the life they had shared. Every moment, every memory, every choice they had made together had been a gift. Zelda lived another 7 years after Vaughn's death, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She spent her days on the porch Vaughn had built, watching the ranch he had established, remembering the life they had shared. She told stories about him to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive, celebrating the love they had shared. When she finally joined him, it was on a warm spring morning, much like the one when their son Marcus had been born so many years before. She died with a smile on her face, her last thoughts of the cowboy who had saved her life and given her everything she had ever dreamed of. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the Z-Bar Ranch, under a sky as wide and blue as the one they had admired together for over 5 decades. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and a single inscription that Marcus had chosen. Together in life, together in death, together forever. The Z-Bar Ranch continued for generations after them, run by their descendants, a lasting testament to what Zelda Zimmerman and Vaughn Zeller had built together. But more than the land or the cattle or the horses, their true legacy was the love story they had lived. A story that began with a terrified woman clutching documents that proved a banker's theft, and a cowboy brave enough to help her get those documents to the Marshal. It was a love story that had grown from danger and chance into something beautiful and lasting, a love that had weathered every storm and celebrated every joy, a love that had built not just a ranch, but a family, a community, a life worth living. And in the end, it was a love story that proved what Vaughn had always believed, that some people are meant to meet, that the universe conspires to bring them together, and that when you find your person, you hold on tight and never let go. Their story became legend in Montana, told and retold by their descendants and neighbors, a reminder that even in the hardest times, love and courage can create miracles. And every spring, when wildflowers bloomed on the hill where they rested, it seemed like the land itself was celebrating the love story of Zelda and Vaughn Zeller, the woman with documents that proved the banker a thief, and the cowboy who got those documents to the Marshal, and in doing so, found the love of his life.